a journey of discovering what is amazing about yourself and how to move forward seamlessly and dispel a lot of beliefs that are limiting and holding you back. Tonight, you're going to have an opportunity to dig into and consider something more about intuition. And I want to be clear on one thing for you. I want you to really understand something. Yes, and is a valuable concept, and not necessarily the improv form of yes and, but the yes and philosophy when two seemingly competing ideas are both true. And that's something really important to consider when there's an importance of staying in some type of natural intuitive state. Unconscious and conscious mind, the way to get into your intuitive self is a way to naturally connect without effort. By releasing and falling into that openness, you're able to tap into the accumulated knowledge that's been filed and stored. If you've experienced something in some way or another, in any pixel type level, whether it's in a movie, whether it's through hearing someone else's story, or if you've experienced something yourself, then you have the possibility of accessing that. So it's like a combination of things happening with your conscious and unconscious self. In the way the brain works and the way that you're accessing information, that intuitive notion allows you to connect to that. Now, it also allows you in many thought processes to connect to the intuitive notions of the universe. And if you ever want to say accurately that the universe is conspiring in your favor, which it is, that's really interesting to consider. Thinking about what you think on, what words you use when you think, then that is the universe working in your favor. That is the universe giving you what you focus on. How many of you have heard the saying, hurt people hurt people? They're abundant in opportunities to complain, things going wrong in their life that they can gripe about. What do you think that is? There's hardship and there's reality of hardship, and there is all kinds of things that happen in the world that we can't seem to make sense of and wish it didn't happen. And I do not intend to take any of that away from anyone. But it's simple for you to tell people in your life, even if it's yourself, if you're frustrated about trying not to change, how connected you are to the problem if you're connected to the story. If you're connected to the size of the problem, making sure someone understands how really bad it was or how really different it was or however anything of it was, then you're connected to that story and you're growing that story. Now, you may not be growing the story if you're focused on change, but you're disabling the results you want by having that nagging idea. If you tap into your intuition, you can calm yourself and access the information and be given the answer. Because when you're intuitive, you're openly listening. Paying attention to your intuitive is tapping into that unconscious mind and the collective wisdom that is there from the accumulation of experiences and knowledge and information you've had, and you're able to find it. Now, it's important to manage it. It's as important to manage the idea of your intuitive self as it is to manage your own thoughts, your cognitive, purposeful mind and thoughts. It's both should be managed well. I just should on you, on everyone. I'm going to tell a quick story. I'm just going to share something honestly with you. I did this podcast already once, and about 15 minutes into it, or 12 minutes, for 14 minutes, I got so lost, and I went to about 17 minutes, and I realized I'd lost my train of thought twice, and I wasn't quite sure what I was saying. And my intuitive notions, my intuitive self, the part of me that flows well was screaming at me saying, "You're not on target with this, man, and you're just talking out of the side of your neck." And I stopped. And I considered starting over, and I considered starting in the middle, just picking it back up where I left off, and then seeing if we can't just merge them together. And I'm going to look at both recordings and decide, or just let it happen, right? I'm just going to let the team handle it. What happens when we lose connection with our intuitive self and our flow state, that could just be a recognition from our truest self, from that intuitive self that's saying, hey, you don't want to be X, Y, or Z. You don't want to be, in this case, it was inaccurate and talking out the side of your neck and repetitive. You want to get to the point. That's the name of the podcast, after all. So you're probably here wanting to know the point. And the point is, intuition's very powerful. It's also, if unmanaged, dangerous. It can be a form of establishing an unconscious bias. If we're not intentional and we're not evaluating it. So some people say, no, I like logic over. There's a lot of articles. Just Google the thought of what intuition is, and just Googling why be intuitive or intuition, and you'll find some type of evidence of talking about either or. This is very similar to what talking about the critical mind. The critical mind can have a heyday with you and take you down all kinds of roads you don't want, especially if used in the wrong environment. So it's important to be intentional and give your critical mind, that part of your brain that wants to be critical and protective and cautionary, give it a purpose so that it stays busy, and then give yourself a vision and a dream and a thought process that's big enough to keep the rest of you busy focusing in that direction, and your life becomes a lot simpler. I'll get asked a lot, why do that big of a dream or that big of a goal? Isn't that a fantasy? And you've heard episodes and discussions about fantasy. And when we start bringing on guests, when you start having guests appear here, or if you're someday a guest on here, that may be a topic that we really dig into, is what is the difference between a fantasy, a dream, and a reality? Some of that is answered through our intuitive self, through that collective wisdom, through the accumulated knowledge and understanding you have on things. If you consider intuition to be a flow state, or if you consider your intuition to be a gut check, a gut feeling on something, well, my gut just tells me. Now, maybe your intuitive self is more of a really centered Om type of prayer, but a lot of people think of intuition and they think of a yogi floating off the ground and, holding their fingers a certain way with a certain posture with crossed legs, tapping into the intuitive collective conscious or whatever. And that's not necessarily that's like the idea of when some people hear meditation that that it's a kumbaya thing. And meditation is a way of calming the mind to get intentionally useful about how our mind works. And however you want to achieve that, there's yogis and there's experts in the world that have mastered the idea of the best posture to allow your body to be not be considered, so that you can free your mind into a state of meditation. So there's nothing wrong with going down those paths to learn from those experts on how they're calming their body. Another way to do it is just to sit still and look in one place. I've meditated. I believe I've put myself in meditated states and allowed flow state and intuitive consciousness to exist while working cattle, and that's been shared. So, and many people have said doing some aggressive activity or something where there's danger has allowed them to do that because it shuts down the rest of the brain and allows a singular focus. And there's many forms of ways of getting into these things. What we're talking about today is the importance of tapping into the collective unconscious, and which is about listening to our intuition, and that it's important to manage it. And it's important to allow it. One of the ways that you can guarantee yourself doing that is start paying attention to the things that you're thinking, your first responses and reactions to things that you're ignoring or discarding or discounting. How much are you valuing yourself and your idea and your first impressions? That might be your intuition speaking, and that might be the most connected part of your intuition speaking. Yet you might be canceling the thoughts because they're deemed inappropriate in some way, or some historic event or some history that we're attached to tells us, oh, I've seen that before, and that's X. So pay attention to those things, and you can, rather than discard them, and honor yourself in those first impressions, honor that subconscious, that intuitive notion, and it will grow. But it doesn't mean you need to necessarily listen to it and use it perfectly. It doesn't mean you need to take action off of it. It means noticing what the thought is and keeping it somewhere sacred so that you can access it later and allow time to prove what you're thinking, right, wrong, or different. Because maybe what the intuition, in the case of this podcast, intuition saved you from hearing me babble and lose my place. because my intuition was screaming at me to stop talking and start over or find my place anyway and get into the real nitty-gritty and the value of this discussion. And I was meandering and losing my place and and I got a message from my intuitive self that said stop because I lost my place. I didn't see it that way at first. You could be critical and mean to yourself over the idea that you lost your place or lost your thought. Or you could embrace that there might be a reason why. I've heard people say, "Oh, that must not have been need to be said." Maybe, but maybe it's just time to pause and wait for an answer and hear what might happen. What are all the reasons that we wouldn't do that? Is it because it's uncomfortable? Is it because you think you'll be judged by someone else? I'm confident that we could show some of that podcast. I'm uploading it for my team so that those could be used as examples of ways of demonstrating, because it's really okay to have an experience where a part of you is telling you to stop or helping you readjust yourself. That's a gift, not something to judge as a negative. It's a gift. It's also very simple and easy to fall into a bucket of shame with it. Oh, I shouldn't have done that, and I should just throw that away. So let's think through this for a minute. Intuitive notions, intuitive ideas are a way to tap into that accumulated understanding and knowledge of things that you've experienced and done, as well as the collective wisdom of the universe that you might have captured through just experience with it. And it's important to have this the intuitive self on board, and it's important to use it along with our intentional, cognitive, conscious mind. So it's not either or. I want to stay in logic and critical thinking or intuitive thought and notion. It's both. Because you want to be intentional with the intuitive thoughts. You want to be intentional with what you do with them. And you want to learn what they mean, what they're trying to tell you. And that becomes an art form. That becomes a nuance of understanding who you are and how you work. Tapping into that intuitive to the intuitive and getting into the flow state could mean a lot of things for you. So the question is starting where you start with what you already know and understand about it. And what you already know and understand about it is however you currently categorize or catalog that part of yourself, whether it's your gut or flow state or whatever it is. So once you go there, be cautious and notice the ideas and the thoughts that you're saying, especially in first impressions when you're having your first experience with something. And start at least noticing and listening and paying attention. The idea of intuition is that we quiet ourselves to listen. So in order to do that, we want to calm. We want to find some space, some time to pause. I love the word delay. We were in a seminar. We were working with an executive team. It was such a great day, and we were hitting some things. And the one of the people attending said, we should delay our response, not, rather than discard, or rather they didn't like the word pause. But delay helped them connect to the idea that they're not stopping. So they had such an urge to do something again. It was just such an urge, but it was misguided intuition. It was because it was more coming off of a fear of something in history. So there was confusion. I call that mud. When we're in the mud, we can't tell the difference between the water and the dirt. It all just conjoins. And then you find a pebble or a rock or a bug or something else in the mud. When you're in the mud, everything's connected and attached, and it's very hard to separate it. And in trying to separate that, the idea came up, let's delay. That way, in that particular situation, the mind gets to hear, we're going to still follow through. We still have the choice to follow through with this action. We're just going to delay to give ourselves time to consider new things. Use that instead of pause. Just delay. And then allow that time and space to make room to consider what this is connected to. If you are really connected to the story and you're having to accentuate details in a historic story, then you're not in a sense of collective, you're in a sense of reactive. You're not in a sense of intuitive, you're in a sense of reactive, which Again, unmanaged, that can be automated and become what seems to be intuitive because it's just become natural to do, which is why we'll end up in a behavior of writing last year in the first few days of every year. You find yourself writing the year wrong because that's become so natural to write that way. It's automated, it's natural, it's intuitive, it's instinctive. That's a time to understand the difference between something reactive to something we've done all along that's been automated versus intuitive. Because in that moment, you can stop and you can delay writing and you can think through. You can allow your logic to remind yourself of what year it is. And you can ask, you can sit and listen for what is the reason. Maybe there's something in the previous year that you're hanging on to, and your intuitions wants you to clean it up or do something different or take an action. Maybe it's not, but is there a reason that that's being drawn, or is it just a reaction? You can start asking those questions, and you'll be amazed at what kind of answers you get. It's in the simplest of things that some of the most profound things happen. Same thing happens in strengths. You can reel back some of your strengths, and if you consider them more sacred, sometimes that's the best thing you can do. People say, why not run forward and do this? It's somebody, their strengths, they thought they were very proud of their strengths. They had their Clifton strengths, but they also had some other views of strengths, and they were very proud of it. And the question was, why would I ever hold that back? It's perfect. It gets me everywhere I need to go. Problem was, this person was known as being a bulldozer, and other people weren't happy. And they were leading people and helping other people. It's like, so that's the reason. You wouldn't know that if you don't delay and hold back and slow down and look at purpose and reason and intention. And the intuitive can help us learn that and see that if we're paying attention. And we'll learn those things faster when we're paying attention. And we want to manage those with our logical thought processes and systems. So that's it for me. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and that you take this to heart and move forward with this and make some change happen in your life. And tap into that collective wisdom. Tap into that intuitive notion. And make sure you're on target with life and all that it has to offer you in the innate, beautiful way that you can move forward to be your best. Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of The Point with me, Jeff Spikes. The greatest compliment you could give me is liking, loving, and sharing this episode with all your friends. So please, if you're on Spotify, iHeart, or iTunes, leave a 5-star rating and review. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Make sure to tag me. I love hearing from you, the listeners of this show. The links for all my social and iTunes are in the show notes. Also, if you'd like to engage with me in anything related to my coaching, consulting, speaking, or programs, please visit jeffspikes.com for everything you would need to know to engage with me offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Point.